show off some of his work. Thank you, Matt.
Sorry about that.
So that's all right. We're going to jump in here, and like I mentioned, if Jason's able to join us, we're going to hand things off. But I just want to welcome you to Team XAPI Profiles. We are sort of focused on getting people into the user mode with XAPI Profiles. I know Judy has expressed an interest in actually building a profile for her project. Might I ask Zolt, Peter, and Julian to introduce themselves a bit for the group?
Sure. All right, Peter,
go ahead, Julian. You're like a day ahead.
All right. So yeah, I'm Julian Davis. I've been playing with XAPI for a while. Was with XAPI user group in Australia, and worked closely with Peter in the last few cohorts in what we're doing. And we last developed in the last cohort an application where we started using geolocation within the XAPI within an application, and capturing it within XAPI and then mapping it. And going through this led me onto profiles, which discovered that there actually wasn't a profile for geolocation except using the GeoJSON setup. So I started investigating a little further, and that led us to where we are now. So my background is in web development and adult education. And many years ago, Royal Australian Navy. That's me.
Thank you, Julian.
Hi, everyone. Okay.
Oh, well, you go first.
My name is Joel. I'm a senior learning technologist at Amazon. I just switched teams. That's why I missed the last two meetings, or one meeting. Kind of transitioned last year. I worked at AWS, so I didn't have time to look at that catapult, but I'm interested in actually spin it up and see how far we can get my AWS account. And background, I started the early first couple of cohorts with the Torrance learning thing. I don't know, 6-7 years ago now. I don't know when it was. So I've been trying to use this XAPI as much as I can. I have an engineering, computer science background, and teaching English and in social design.
Thank you.
Okay,
Peter?
I might jump in. Peter Hawkins. I run an online learning development business in Melbourne, Australia. As Julian said, he and I and a group of other XAPI aficionados have been running a little group here for a few years now. Very, very fascinated with XAPI and its opportunities. My business has now done a couple of large XAPI projects and implementations here. We are also quite keen on sort of profile development. As Julian said, we're looking into a geolocation profile, but the other thing is I have a personal crusade to get rid of some of the really crappy profiles that were imported into the profile server in the early days, and so have been putting together some alternative profiles that work a bit better as substitutes for things like the streams, activity streams profile, because it just doesn't work, and the IRIs are dated, and activity streams wasn't intended to be XAPI and all of that. And so, yeah, quite interested in this work.
Okay, thank you. Matt, I know you're rather well known. You want to do a quick background for anybody that might have missed it?
Sure. Matt Kleber from Torrance Learning. I joined this group partially just because I joined most of the groups just to kind of keep an eye on what's going on. But I'm particularly interested in the profile group because I have been, well, partially wanting to get more into the weeds with the profiles because I've been looking at them and kind of breaking them down. What's in it? What's part of it? What do you need when you go to create a new one? But I haven't actually done it in terms of actually starting from scratch and wiring it all together. And partially before this newer profile server, it was a little bit of a slog to kind of do it by hand and kind of just reason around the whole thing. But once you break it apart, you can kind of see it a little bit easier. Now with the profile server, there's just drop downs and things are the linked data part of it is actually linked, and so you can actually have a drop down that pulls in from the profiles, the vocab server. So I'm curious to jump in there and play around with actually creating one. And also, now that you can kind of look at what other published profiles are in there and see how they're all connected up without having to just sift through all the JSON and figure it out. I think that'll be really beneficial to get in there.
Yep. So rather than stalling or delaying, I am going to take the path of showing you what I know and ask those who know different or more to chime in as we go. And if that includes Jason, hopefully we'll be able to step in when he has time. So part of what I want to do is drag onto the screen a few pages that I've prepared here.
The Navy's new learning stack will continue to leverage an LMS and SCORM for self-paced interactive courseware levels 1 through 4, as well as computer-aided
Are you
instruction.
screen sharing? I can't see.
Good point. Let me do that.
Okay.
And
Thought
then I
maybe
also
it was just I wasn't
realized,
saying it, but-
I just realized I need to share audio in this case. And that may be helpful for all of you wanting to see what I'm trying to show you. My apologies.
I was patiently waiting.
You can kind of hear it.
It sort of jumped in and played while I was dragging it over and preparing it. So now hopefully you're seeing it.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play and let Jason speak to us through the video for a few minutes. I promise you he was supposed to be on live, but
which is often facilitated by an instructor in the classroom. In addition, any SCORM content that is accessed by learners will also automatically generate XAPI data. So the reporting analytics on SCORM content can be enhanced through XAPI and an LRS as well. This is all done on the server side. In this table, you can see the content types and the types of modalities targeted. Notice that several of the modern types of content, such as mobile, performance support activities, videos, and simulations, those are all lumped under XAPI-based content. As I mentioned on the previous slide, XAPI is an enabler of these new types of content. Since the Learning Stack LMS and the Learning Record Store integrated, the Navy also has the option to have content accessed from both inside and outside of the LMS environment now, which provides much more needed flexibility since many of today's learning experiences can take place outside of the LMS. Also, the Navy has adopted Moodle's quiz capability as their new learning assessment system. This part of Moodle also has been instrumented to automatically generate and track XAPI assessments and provide results in a new test item analysis dashboard, which will ultimately help the Navy better understand the effectiveness of training and then make correlations from assessment outcomes to content and other types of activity engagements. So adding these new capabilities to the Learning Stack really required the Navy and the team here to reuse or create new XAPI profiles based on Navy-specific requirements. This is not an XAPI 101 brief, so I assume everyone following this presentation has a general understanding of XAPI and XAPI statements. I won't go into the technical aspects of the anatomy of a statement or anything like that, but everyone knows that XAPI statements provide the general structure of the data being stored, but there's a lot of possibilities for tracking an activity, an interaction, and representing that in an XAPI statement based on all the new types of RL content. A lot of different ways to represent it. So that was a real big need for coming up with a profile. Besides needing an LRS for storing the data, one of the first things that we defined were the usage guidelines for implementing XAPI. In other words, what are the data collection requirements? Since a profile defines how the data should be structured for different types of content, it really becomes the blueprint for planning your data collection and planning your dashboards, your analytics, just your overall data strategy. So another great way to think about XAPI profiles, and remember what they are, is that they're the blueprints for building XAPI content. You wouldn't try to build, a house or a commercial building without first designing blueprints, right? Well, the same could be said about building XAPI-based content. If you don't define how you're going to report on the data up front, you'll end up with a mess in the end. And profiles help you solve that problem, or at least prevent it from ever happening. The Navy realized how important that was, and that profiles should be created for some of the new types of RRL content that were needed. While they could leverage the SCORM and video profile, there weren't any other profiles out there for the way the Navy would like to implement performance support, simulations, and assessments. So this was the first major focus of the Navy's library: define the requirements for XAPI on these new profiles to support RRL content, but then also leverage existing profiles and best practices where possible. Let's talk about the Navy's XAPI library. We're going to go over the objectives. The first key objective was to establish several initial content resources for the Learning Stack content developers, acquisition professionals, and admins. We wanted this to be more of a role-based capability, so it would be easy to find the resources you need based on the type of role you had. We wanted to create the most common XAPI profiles that developers could immediately follow to implement XAPI successfully in the Navy. We came up with a common reference profile with some basic types of activities that could be reused and tracked across other profiles. We identified e-learning content. The Navy's still using SCORM and an LMS to deliver their content. We could leverage that existing SCORM profile, video, and some other common ones. We wanted to produce code libraries for the profile so developers could reuse and create interoperable custom content. We wanted to create some functional content examples, would help them visualize and be able to utilize those code libraries and wrappers and help them understand how XAPI was implemented into different types of content.
The audio just went off for me. Did that happen for anybody else?
Yeah, I thought maybe it was just me. I just happened to switch.
And me too. Yeah, I don't hear anything.
Dramatic silence.
And Jason is just failing all over the place.
Then when he's not here. Brian, are you still there? Are you able to hear us? Oh, maybe he got disconnected. Oh, yeah, I think he got disconnected on his end.
I don't think World War III's been declared. At least no pop-up has come in my news feed.
No.
So I don't think that's it.
Or it's just rippling across the world somewhere.
That's possible.
How we've pissed off the Navy and they're coming after us.
Oh, that's how they redact it. They just cut off all feeds.
They're listening.
It is
I've heard a number of conspiracy theories recently. This would be a great opportunity to start a new one, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That the Navy is collecting everyone's learning experiences in some massive
Yeah, there's a
database
little
they
known
know.
part of the XAPI protocol.
They're uploading it to your 5G implant.
Oh, yeah, well, that's what it is.
Got
Yeah,
that on
I'm
my arm.
vaccinated, so that'll be the explanation.
It really does go on our permanent records.
I had a friend who went to a violent film show last night, so that actually has been going through my head today. That was synchronous.
Wow, you guys are actually going to rock concerts again. Envy,
Wow.
envy, envy. We're
Okay.
all locked down here.
Somebody, well, is in Texas. And they just had COVID. They're out of quarantine now, but I'm just, I'm not saying whether it was a good decision. I'm just saying it's a thing that happened. And the concert did require vaccination and masking. So there's that.
See, we're all in panic today because my state just set a record for the highest this morning, the highest number of rated new cases of COVID ever recorded in the country. And you'll laugh, it was 1,800. Told you you'd laugh.
We have this every second, probably.
Hello, this is Brian. How's the meeting going?
We'll finish your deck, Brian.
We're just gossiping about you and Jason. Your names are mud in the learning space now.
I don't know if it's worse, not showing up or leaving halfway through the meeting. I'm leaving. Would you believe a self-induced power outage? My laptop wasn't plugged in. Did not know it until no warning, just boom, done.
No, there actually was a warning because I could see up in the top of your taskbar on your Mac that it had 30% left and it was red. So it was clearly not plugged in.
Sorry, it's been a long day.
That's all right.
I did not see it.
That's all right.
But I'm in the process of rebooting that machine, so I signed in on another one because it's going to take a few minutes to get things back up to where they were. And I'm glad to hear you guys jumped in and moved things along.
I'm doing the comedy show.
Say again?
I'm doing a comedy show. I'm testing out some material for Vegas.
You and I both. Some people would say so am I.
So you're telling us why the chicken crossed the road. You're going to give us the punchline, or?
Oh gosh, I heard a really good punchline to this recently. And now, of course, it's completely escaped. Darn you. If you hadn't asked, I may have eventually gotten there, but now you're just gonna never know.
We're going to mock you while you're trying to cross the road. I have to say, you're all being good sports to me about this. This is challenging.
Oh, being a software trainer was my first job out of college. I'm about to turn 43. I'm used to vamping through tech, outs or whatever.
Yeah.
I'll just start doing it for other people too.
You're about to turn 43. Well, us people who are about to turn 56 are a bit envious, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Just saying, 25 years of demoing software and teaching software and relying on software and making software. I think, I think everybody's used to it by now. You're even more used to it. You're 13 years more used to it than I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of us are.
I've had
Yeah, I guess you have to
30
get to
years more of
a
letdown.
I guess you have to get to a certain age to, being able to take the Facebook outage with a grain of salt.
Gosh, that was the best.
Yeah, well, yeah. I do actually have a Facebook account. I think I logged into it 2 years ago too.
How's your MySpace look?
I've forgotten my MySpace password.
That's a good thing. Some would
The
say.
Facebook outage was beautiful until I had to do work stuff with people I only ever contact through Messenger.
Right.
I love the Twitter post. Hello, literally everybody.
Oh, yeah, right. No kidding.
Yeah, I was on Reddit and frankly, I was not even aware there was an outage other than people on Reddit talking about it.
Yep. It's a thing, and people on Reddit will talk about it.
Nope. They actually will talk about anything and some things that aren't things.
They will make them
So-
things.
Yeah.
It's both
So
the best and the worst of things.
If I can try and bring us back to any sort of an agenda, was what he was showing familiar to people? The NETC and Navy resources? Is that
Yeah.
new to people or is that familiar?
It's familiar, I think, for me anyway.
That's one. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah. I mean, I've been I've been vaguely keeping my ear to the ground on this, so it's a little familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't, I think I've seen a few of those screenshots.
So I was literally just about to put a URL in the chat when the world dropped out from under my feet. My point is I see it as sort of a roadmap of profiles and how they can be used. There's an implementation guide and a common reference platform. And one of the things I wanted Jason to come in and do was help verify with me. I believe the common reference platform is sort of a baseline, almost like a Dublin core of what the Navy is going to use as common, verbs around things outside of profiles or even before a profile is used. Does that align with people's expectations or differ?
Yeah, are you talking about like the master object model thing, the mom models that they had in there? I mean, I think it's kind of the same concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, my understanding of the one that I'd seen, and before I'd seen it, I hadn't really thought about creating a specific profile that's kind of like the baseline in a way that you could kind of borrow from, but it's kind of a useful idea that we've started looking at for some of our profile, when we're starting to look at profiles and thinking about, okay, here's the common things like completed. We're always going to use this particular completed verb because the ADO completed makes no sense. So we'll just put the launch completed, those things that we always use in here. So when you're going to create another profile, you've already kind of got that, all these pieces and parts, or maybe like extensions that you use all the time that are maybe custom extensions or previously published ones that you just, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know how it's used in practice, and maybe they haven't even totally implemented it, but I'm curious about that.
I believe it's been launched to the Navy. They're sharing it with their vendors. I don't know if it's actually in common usage, if I can use that term.
Yeah, that was my question because I've never been to the Navy. So besides that, you stole this deck and we're watching it, and then it seems like we actually recording it, so we will maybe get away with this. But is this something that's open, and so they're
The
sharing it with
website
the
is
world?
actually open. It was shared with me
Okay.
in March, and I found documentation in the video and other places that it was available to the Navy last July. The video that I'm showing was actually part of a conference where he presented this material to Department of Defense, but it's an open conference. It's not classified material by any means. Like I said, they're presenting it as a standard for their vendors who are developing training for not just Navy, but Department of Defense wide, as ADL initiative is designed for.
Just put a link to that profile that I was referring to. It's more broadly Department of Defense rather than Navy, but I think the Navy does have a version of that in there too.
Yeah. Yeah, now that they're in the profile server, that actually validates what I mentioned is they have published the profile server URL. So if you go to it without the full information, you get a password. But if you go to XAPI-library, and again, I realize I'm typing this in without sharing yet, but I want to make sure I get there. We'll go back to Zoom and share. And before I make the same mistake twice in one night, I'm going to plug this machine in because you all notice it's about 78%. As soon as I share. And Julian, why didn't you say anything? Or was it Peter that noticed? I'm sorry.
Oh, it was I, but
What? Install the Zoom audio device. I'm not running. So are you seeing the Navy XAPI library screen?
Yep.
yes.
Yes, good. Okay. So part of the screen is they allow you to select your role if you have a specific role. Typically what Jason would do is go into view all, and I tend to do this myself. The resources are also listed under menus as if you had selected one. So what selecting one of those would do is only show you limited access to information. This way you have everything available to you. And like I said, this URL, I'm going to throw it in the chat now. If I go any further, I'll forget. Is open and accessible without a login. But if you cut the URL off and don't put XAPI library, you're going to get password protected content. So there is some security on this server. It is a US government server. You need to be aware of that. So no playing with it. And then what I was talking about is this section on the implementation guidelines and how to track common activities, the common reference profile. These two pieces sort of look to me like a roadmap, a well-documented, if you will, roadmap of how to get started. So I just wanted to sort of pull them up and get people familiar with them in a sense. And my other machine may actually be ready for me now to try and switch over to it, but we're going to let it roll a little bit further. So the implementation guidelines talks about the statement requirements, has this nifty graphic of the statement data model, which elaborates beyond active verb objects. So it was one of the first things I saw that did that and allowed people to recognize just the minimum requirements are really not going to get you very far. And then the other key thing is to actually highlight the code in its own format like this. And as you go further on, the statements get longer and longer. But the other thing to talk about is the requirements are shown in a section like this. So the activity object is expected to have these requirements. And then the other piece they do is say it will not have these requirements. So that to me is good documentation in terms of this is what I must do, this is what I must not do. And it continues on. If I scroll back up to the table of contents, it continues on through each of these items that way. So it's quite detailed and quite well written from my perspective. That's part of why I wanted to highlight it to this group. So the statement requirements are elaborated for active verb objects, context, and timestamps. Most of us won't create timestamps ourselves. Somebody writing software, Judy, might need to do that or might need to have a team look at that. But for the most part, our tools, our JavaScript libraries are managing that. Or when you send a statement to an LRS, if it doesn't see timestamps, it adds them when it receives the statement as a way to log that. So one of the things that I've looked at is I can build a learning record provider that can queue up internally, either on an iOS or some other kind of app on a tablet. And when it sees the network, if it queues things up and creates its own timestamp, and sends that to the server, the LRS says, I got this and here's when it was created. It doesn't necessarily match when it was received. If you send it without timestamps, the LRS says it has no timestamps, here's when I received it. So I think that's a clever design as well. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about. So I'm gonna switch over to this other one. Any questions or comments? Come on.
No, that makes sense, and that's sensible, as you say, it's sensible design from a software standpoint.
That was very quiet. I believe somebody said something, but I didn't hear much of it.
Oh, I guess I'm too far away from the mic. It seems like sensible design, as you said, from a software standpoint, to choose whether timestamps happen automatically or programmatically.
Thank you. Was that Laurel?
It was.
I'm not.
I can hear you just fine, by the way, Laurel.
Okay. Yeah, it's my system. Like I said, I'm on a different machine now, so the audio is not optimal here. I don't know why. So the other thing I wanted to mention is the profile server, and I think that is not where I wanted to go. Sorry, I clicked something I shouldn't have. Oh, I know why. There we go. I'm going to start with profiles. So I'm going to start by exploring the profiles on the profile server. And what I wanted to do, what brought me here right now, is someone had shared, and I started to look and didn't see who it was. Someone had shared the Navy Common Reference Profile URL. So this is publicly listed on the XAPI profile server, and it was published the 4th of August. And then the other thing to realize is it's pointing to that page we were just on. It's pointing actually to the PDF within that common reference profile. So it is pointing to this other document, the common reference profile. The other thing I should mention is the NETC is a division of the Navy. The early versions of the document said NETC. It is now renamed as Navy Common Reference Profile. So that to me means it's been approved. It's an implication, and I'm inferring that, but I believe it means it's been approved Navy-wide rather than just the original, the originator of the document.
NETC is a division. I'm not, if at least if I'm going with my somewhat paltry government experience here, I suppose it's possible that it's also that the same acronym has been used for a project or something, but NETC is a division, so that might also be the possibility there.
Yes. So I unplugged my speakers that I had plugged in earlier, and now I'm hearing much better. I don't know what happened there.
Navy Education and Training Command, that's it.
Right.
The important question, though, is are those speakers XAPI enabled? Because then we can go to the LRS and inquire on the statements and find out what went wrong. If they're not XAPI enabled, I want to know why.
It took me a while to get what you were referring to. They're not. They're older than they should be, I think.
How 21st century that is.
Yep. So I'm going to work on switching back over into the other system. My question for you is, should I continue with that video once I get there? Should we just go into discussion further about what I've shown you? I'm going to send a quick poke out to Jason, just because. It's awful quiet.
Okay, either way. Although I'm curious to see what others think about what we might want to do. I know, Judy, you had you were wanting to work on a Pebble profile. Have you started working on it, or is it kind of a future focused thing?
I haven't started. I mean, obviously, we have an authoring tool. It emits XAPI. There are, we have the sort of background documentation for that. So it's been planned and such, but it hasn't been planned in a way that's specific to creating a published profile.
Mm-hmm.
We do want to create a published profile, and that's kind of always been the plan for, somewhere close to launch. And, like I've told this group, if we want to specifically work on the Pebble profile as like a concrete case study, that's great. That's fine with me. If we want to do something else, I will use the knowledge that I gained to go off and help create the Pebble profile. So either way, it's good. Yeah, I'm offering it as a concrete thing that we can use, but it's either way, I'm gonna be here to learn.
I personally would love to do that. I think that would be a great suggestion myself.
Yeah, I think you can, I don't know if you've looked at the profile server much yet. You can create an account and a working group and start working on a profile and just leave it in draft mode. You don't have to publish it. People can see that you've created the working group, but they can't see your profiles unless you've actually published them. So,
one thing I can offer on this, I've actually got a working group that I've set up. Another hat I wear is I'm president of the XAPI users group. And so I set up a profile, a couple of profiles under a working group called the XAPI users group, and we've got a server running so that all the IRIs resolve and that sort of thing. We've got, as I say, 2 profiles currently up there on the profile server. We could use that working group if you like. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If there's any, if that could get more people working on it or anything like that, that'd be great. I don't know that there's, if we needed to create our own, it doesn't sound like it would be a big deal, but yeah, I appreciate the offer. Either way.
Yeah, I just pasted that link in there. I think that's the one you're referring to, the content repository and social media. Yeah, it's and then you can invite people as collaborators, but I think they have to be in the system first before you can add them. So just one thing to know if we do that.
Well, it sounds like I should go ahead and create an account, and then you can add me and we can, that's going.
Peter, Julian, do you want?
Sorry, that like you're in a stadium now.
Yeah.
You've got some echo happening there. I didn't quite understand what the question was.
You may need to mute one of your computers.
I did. One more thing. There we go. So I had to mute and get the microphone and the speaker on the same one. So it's a bit challenging. Apologies.
I told you should have XAPI enabled them. We would have been able to find it.
We
So the
diagnose your
point I started to make, Peter, was do you want to take a minute and demo the profile creation side of the XAPI server?
Absolutely, if you like.
I think it would help Judy. It
I-
might,
Only
it might
problem
be
is I'm
novel
on
for some of the
my
other
phone.
people
I'm
who haven't
actually
seen.
not on my laptop. I'd have to run up to the laptop.
Oh,
so
I
you-
apologize.
you can-
I cut you off.
No,
guard.
if you can give me 30 seconds, I can do that, but I'll need 30 seconds. Just a sec.
Yep.
Does anyone juggle? That's also
Actually, I do.
Two machines right now.
oh wrong person. You're already busy.
Actually, I do juggle. I learned it at university.
Well, we've all got to learn something in college, I guess.
Clearly, your
that was the
university
only thing
days
I
were
learned in college.
productive.
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter. I probably should have texted you and asked you if you were ready for that instead of just counting on it.
That's quite all right. I'm nearly there.
So in the meantime, I will make sure I get the Navy URL as well as the profile server URL into the chat.
Ryan, can you also cross-post any of the new URLs that you've posted in the Slack channel so that when the meeting dies, we still have access?
Yes, and I'm saving the chat as a reminder to do that, but I'm over there now. So Matt, can you ensure that Peter can share?
Yeah, I think everyone should be able to, but let me know if you can't. Who can share? All participants. Yeah, so I think everyone can.
All links are shared in what's it called? Slack. All done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is
See, I'm not the only one with two computers.
Another clone.
okay. So that should fix it. It didn't.
So mute speakers on the other machine, you're not working.
Okay. I've abandoned one of my connections. So now there's only one of me now, which is more than enough.
That should cut down the juggling.
Sorry, my machine's just taking a little while to respond.
That never happens.
No. I shouldn't have started sharing yet, should I? Anyway, all right, profile server. So it's a pretty straightforward process. As you mentioned, you can set up a working group. Within the working group, you have several profiles, and of course, people get invited to your group. We have set up this profile, this user group, sorry, working group. And it's got these three profiles. The process of doing it is really straightforward. So if we go into one of them and edit it, all you need to do is set up either statements or patterns. In fact, if you look through the other profiles, not very many people fill those out actually. So almost all the work goes into the concepts. Now, there isn't a standard process, but the process that we follow is we make every effort possible to find other people in other profiles that have chosen one of the words that we want. So you can see that this profile actually largely consists of references to the DoD or Tin Can or ADL, all these other words we found that did the job. And so we simply cross-reference them. The only ones we actually then created were these, so 6 items, 3 of which are verbs. One's an activity type, one's an extension, one's an activity. I'm assuming for the moment that everybody's familiar with those, but happy to define them if that's useful. If you go to create one, all you do is you click on add concept and then search. So if we wanted to search for the verb to twiddle or juggle, you search and it'll find anyone else, pardon me, who has registered a juggle. But it's really a good idea to go and type all the synonyms you can think of to find out whether there are any other alternate words. And then, assuming there aren't, I'm not going to go ahead and click it, but you can create a new word, or if you did find a match, highlight it and add it to the profile. Before you go through that though, you really need to exit this screen and have a good look at the word you found and find out whether in fact it does mean what you want, because the definition obviously may not match, and it would only simply confuse people if we take a word that's been registered for one purpose and start recommending people apply it to another. If I go back to one of the words we have registered, I'll pick one of the verbs with Drew, and you can see the information you then enter. Obviously a description, and importantly, an IRI. The IRI should resolve. I mean, you'd think that's a basic requirement, but actually at least 50% and probably more of the IRIs that are on the profile server don't resolve. And that's got a lot to do with the fact that ADL initially, and I spoke to them about this, they regret doing it. They imported activity streams using version 1 activity streams, and activity streams deprecated them. So a lot of the words are using IRIs that once upon a time resolved and don't anymore. So it's pretty important to pick a URL that will continue to resolve. I've made a commitment that our domain will be there forever. But if you don't want to use it, the profile server, when you get to this point, does offer you the opportunity to create an IRI on the profile server so that it can live here. Descriptions are usually only 1 or 2 sentences. So we try and keep them really concise, and I always like, where possible, to provide a little bit of information about the technical use of the word. So, for example, in this case, we're talking about withdrew, and we've said that the actor withdrew the object from a service or course, which is fairly specific, a service or course. So just to avoid ambiguity, you know, we don't use a word like service on its own. We try and be specific. but then also any references to, for example, extensions or other things that should go with it. There's a good example of that in one of our profiles. Where? Count. So we needed to, for one of my clients, we needed this, and there is no such thing as a count. So we created an extension for count, but then this is associated with a series of verbs where, you know, you're doing the counting. This allows us to extend those to include the number. So each of those verbs now recommends the use of this extension. So the descriptions for the associated verbs say to use the count. So effectively you're creating like a little system for how to do this and count it, and then recommend it and be specific about it in such a way that everybody's going to be consistent. And in many cases, I actually included a pattern, not in this profile, but in some of the other profiles, there's a pattern. And a pattern is example statements that would be valid. So it's a relatively straightforward process. It really is just fill in at a registry level to operate the system is really easy. You're just filling in a form, but you need to have sat down with pen and paper first and worked out exactly how these things are going to work. And before that, the right process is to list all of the applications. So for example, with the geolocation profile, what the group's doing at the moment is finding, doing some online research and finding all sorts of things that we think it could be used for and how, and you list those first and then consolidate them down to get your vocabulary. So start with the desired outcome and then work through to develop your vocabulary, do the research using that tool I just showed you to find out who else has got it, making sure that their intended use is consistent. And then after that, you put these in. The other thing I like to do, and this is a poor example, I haven't here, but in many of the other ones we've done it, is put in translations. And I noticed that almost none of the words that are on the profile server have a translation, even though the XAPI standard supports it. But it tends not to be done. So I've drawn on my staff in my organization. So this is sort of moving aside from the XAPI users group, but my own staff, I've got a native French speaker, I've got 2 native Bangladeshi speakers, I've got a couple of people from India, and I've asked them to give me natural language translations for things. So, I mean, I'm not using Google Translate. And so, especially in some of the other profiles we've got, you'll find this is actually populated, which I think is a good thing to do. It's just a nice thing to do for the community to show recognition. But as I say, it's optional and virtually no one does it.
Hey, Peter, can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah.
Can you go back to the concept list? One of the things I've noticed, and you sort of mentioned this, but maybe we can clarify. You said, if I understood it correctly, that you've imported a number of these from other sources. And then
not from other sources, more other profiles on the repository. So it's basically a cross-reference. So
that's
submit
what I meant.
it. Yeah, sorry, you go.
So the ones that you're creating from scratch, are those the only ones you would get if you downloaded the JSON LD?
No, you get all of them. In fact, you actually have the option when you do the export. It gives you a choice as to which one you export, but you normally export them all.
Yeah, I have not seen that choice. That's why I'm asking, because what I wound up realizing, I built an app that would talk to the profile server. And one of the things it could do is download from their API, not X API, but from the API on that site you're on, a specific profile if I had working group access to the API. And when I did that, I only got a few entries. And when I looked at the JSON, I only got a few entries, but I'm looking at the concepts and there were 30, 35, but I got like 6 or 5. And what I'm realizing is what you just said is what's happening is they're pulling in references from other profiles, and apparently only the ones that they create from scratch are being downloaded as that profile detail.
Yeah, there's a note there under the concepts description that kind of mentions that, but I don't know exactly. Like only the concepts created by the profile will be included, but yeah, that is a little bit strange. I'm not sure.
Well, this is what sort of led me to the earlier presentation side of things. The common reference platform, that sort of made me, hearing that sort of made me think, well, maybe that's where the other ones are sort of defined and where they might come from. Not that they actually do. It looks like that was a misperception, but what I'm wrestling with is my application is online. It talks to the API, but it doesn't show me what you're showing me on the web page. How do I reconcile that as a developer? I mean, let alone if if I'm developing this profile under, in an application or another environment, it's the same kind of thing. If I want to build this profile, the JSON that I download doesn't bring it. The API that I'm talking to doesn't bring me everything I need. I'm in a mode where I have a starting point that they've customized, and then I need to go through their listing of those concepts line at a time and add them in myself.
So I think what we need to do is talk to, I'm happy to write to the people involved. Why don't we just do that? Why don't we write to them and say to them, there's a glaring need for an API endpoint to ask for linkages for a particular verb.
I mean, part of it was I didn't have my own vocabulary clear enough to know what I'm asking for.
Yeah.
When I mentioned it to Aaron, it said, well, it's that way by design. Well, that's terrific, but
yeah, I think that it's a relatively straightforward and simple thing. I mean, they just need an API endpoint asking, you could pass it a word and ask for linkages.
Yeah.
That's as trivial as that. What's bizarre though, this is one thing I dislike, is when you click on one of them, as you can see, it only shows its primary profile. So if you were, in this instance, because I clicked on it from our profile, from content repository, it does mention that it's linked. But if I went into it from, the tin can vocabulary, you wouldn't even see that it's linked anywhere else. You just see previewed and it just looks like any other word. So there's no note on a word to say who else is utilizing it. So it would be a very, very valuable thing to do. I don't think it's an obvious thing. We should write to Aaron and an ADL and ask them to include.
Yeah, I do think it would be valuable.
I know that now that I'm thinking of it, I can't remember how I got it. I just know that at one point I downloaded the JSON and it asked me the question. But now when I click on it, it's just downloading. So
yeah,
I'm wondering whether I was wrong, but I'm sure I was asked. It might have actually been an option when I clicked. What happened when you create the profile in the first place? Initially, it shows up as draft, and there's an extra button up here that says publish. And I was the one that did that for this profile, and I had a few options. It might have been there that I remember seeing it. When you publish this profile, do you want it to download the others? It might have been in that. There's an additional button, by the way, saying ask us to preview it, and it says this is optional. But before you go and publish it, you can click that, and then theoretically they will come back with their assessment. In practice, you never hear from them again. So you write to them and you say, would you mind, please having a look at this? And Jason Hard will do it if you're nice to it.
Well, any other questions for Peter?
I just threw one in Slack, Peter, whenever you get a chance. I didn't want to hold up the meeting necessarily, but
I think this was really helpful. This is, you explained, I think, very well. And I think it's very clear. I think that they really, clearly we've come up with some things that we would like to see on the profile serve rather than what's there. But I think that they did a good job of making it very simple, honestly. And I know that was the goal, is that, this was not something that we need to overcomplicate. And I think it's pretty clear. So I guess my question would be, how do you get started? Do you have you just kind of lay all of this out in a Word document, all of the different concepts that you're going to name as part of the profile, or, is there another way that you typically get going?
Yeah, my recommendation is not to do that. My recommendation is starting with finding the applications, doing the online research, and looking to see, aside from me, who is going to want this. And the reason I suggest that is that everybody, by nature of their work, is going to have, a laser focus on a particular application. And the trouble is, it's really hard to see the big picture. And the risk is you create a profile that then locks up a whole lot of really good words for a specific use. No DOD, I'm looking at you, DOD. If you go to the DOD profile, there's a whole lot of really, really, really valuable words in there that are narrowly defined, that they wouldn't have realized were narrowly defined, but a lot of us are going to struggle with them. So it's really important to do that background first, to find out, in this particular series of concepts, what are the industries that are going to use it and why? And what are they doing now? And if I were advising them to install XAPI in their current work, what would it do? And so you just start there before you've even come up with a roadmap for the words themselves and the syntax. It's really good to know the endpoint.
Oh, no, but I really disagree. I want to lock up as many words as possible. I mean, good on them for, now they own those words in the XAPI space. I'm just kidding. I know that we did, when we decided, when we were deciding on which verbs to use, actually a lot of the work that was done for that, for Pebble Pro, was in the cohort. We've had a team in the cohort for several years now, and a lot of the, just this and that has, we've had a user group, at least one user group running in the cohort. And so all of the verbs and everything like that came out of the cohort. We did check against the existing published verbs. We know that we have some additional ones.
I was speaking with my tongue planted firmly in my cheek.
Right.
Yeah. No, being serious, the DoD's done a fabulous job. And it's
put together probably half of what's in here. So it's fabulous.
Yeah. I did notice when the server launched that it seemed like they had imported a bunch of old stuff that, like, I know for a fact that, like, no work has been done on the PDF annotator profile, that was simply imported from, you know, the repository before. So yeah, it's so good on y'all, by the way, for trying to rectify some of that.
Oh, no. Seriously, that wasn't supposed to be taken seriously. My stupid sense of humor. There is one other thing I should mention, by the way, just before I shut up, which is really hard for me to do. I don't do it often. There is a second sort of repository, which we're probably familiar with, the registry, Tin Can Registry. Mm-hmm. And before we went and put together these, we did another bit of background work to try and find out which of the two to use, because they're not consistent with each other. In fact, in some words, you'll find they have a different IRI between them. Wow. And they have different verbs and all sorts of things. So they're absolutely inconsistent. And so we weren't sure, well, which one should we be using? So I ended up writing to Rusticy, who put the registry together, and ADL. And Rusticy eventually came back and said, please don't use the registry. It was a mistake. We're effectively dead. Use the profile server. So just in case anyone asks the question, you don't need to worry about the registry anymore.
Nah, I didn't think so. All right.
Peter, can I take a turn? I wanted to show you why I was asking.
Your turn.
Judy, unless you have any other questions about the profile, setting up the profile side of things?
No.
Okay. Because I mean, that was a chance for you to sort of see behind the scenes. So
yep,
participants can see your screen. That's sort of what I wanted. So here I have an app, and what I've done off screen is pull up the content repository profile. I think I have it named right, Peter?
Yes.
This is the JSON LD that I brought from that download link. I'm going to paste that in here. And what it does is it sort of does a high level assessment, gets the name, gets some of the other bits and pieces that are at the high level. And then down at the bottom of the screen, it shows me that there are 6 concepts and 1 version. And then what I have is a next level processor where I can go through and process each of those concepts. The challenge for me, is the concepts show up here as JSON within JSON, or an array of arrays, if you will. And all I'm doing is calculating how many top items are in that array. Now, further on, we could talk about templates having an array of rules. But so far, I mean, for this profile, I just wanted to look at the concept side of things. So as I click process, what it's going to do is this field that I clicked on has been pulled from here as relating to concepts. The script is going to grab that information and take it onto another screen and process it into individual records. And it's going to populate some of the fields. It's going to look at the keys. It's going to look at concept values. And so what I've been trying to do as I introspect and understand the JSON LD is to look at what each of these concepts are and see how they're structured. And yes, this is what I can look at on the profile server, but part of understanding for me is to be able to process it back into this environment and let me work with it directly. And like I mentioned to Peter, it's a challenge for me to look at a profile on the server, see that there's, I think it was 23 different concepts, but only find that 6 of them came through. And then the other thing, if I create a new record, we're going to go into a different profile. but I have a link here, a button here, that it is going to go pull from the API of the XAPI profile server, say that 5 times fast, and get me the video profile. And so it pulls in the data, and then I can go through the same kind of process and process it. And here it shows me there's 23 unique concepts. And I'm starting to understand that the video profile then has these unique concepts that it's pulling out. It has 3 patterns, 9 templates, and 1 version. So again, we can go through and process the templates in this one. And it's the same kind of thing. It's taken that array of arrays, pulling that into this version and creating individual records for each of those. So if I step back, you can see the related records are appearing here.
Okay.
And so at this point, all I'm really trying to do is digest the JSON LD and understand what it's, how it's structured and what it's doing for me. But I sort of hit that middle roadblock of why am I not getting concept information? I think Peter put me right, and I now understand that what I'm getting is concepts that are unique to the profile, and the shared ones aren't being pulled through.
Interesting. I wonder if I can connect API to Airtable. I haven't used FileMaker in many years.
Yes, I'm also 56, so I have a few years old.
See if I can offend everyone on the call and call them old. Perhaps not Matt.
No, I didn't take
Older than
it.
you.
I just meant, I guess I've had more time to play with it. But
I love
part of
FileMaker.
it is I look at what tool I've used and I say, well, it knows JSON now.
Yeah.
I have to feed it, the structures, and frankly, the learning experience for me is getting in there and trying to dissect, okay, how does this tool do this? And the challenge has been, it's an array of arrays of arrays. How deep do I need to go? And when I look at the documentation that they have, I didn't even show that part, but since I'm going to look at it myself, I'll bounce back in here. The
Think
other
you're in
thing that
Inception
I'm
now.
doing- I'm sorry?
I think you're in Inception now.
Well, the other thing that I did was I said, well, let me look at what that looks like against the profile information. So this is the table that you see in the profile in GitHub. And what I've done is populated another column with data from what I just generated. So I can now start to digest, well, the IRI is here. The URI is this one. It's showing me a string value of profile, and it must be. So that's, and I can also evaluate against this is required, that's required. So I'm starting to build calculations that say there's, and apparently I don't have it on the screen, but there's another, on other screens, there's another calculation at the bottom that say there are 8 elements filled out, and there should have been 9, or, one of them's optional, so 8 is fine, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've done is done that for each of the sections. We didn't really go into the version objects. We went into not templates, not patterns, extensions. 7.1 verbs, activity types. There we go. So part of it is the terminology that you use in one area is generalized, and here it's called verbs, activity types, and attachment usage types. But in another area, it's got another term associated with it. But what I'm finding is this structure that I'm showing you here in this table is reused in different places. So needless to say, I have been trying to digest what the standard is, what the publication of that standard looks like, and then what is the data that I'm getting from the server. And that's what this tool is doing right now. It's just helping me understand where we're at with what we're doing. And random call.
That's absolutely gorgeous work, Brian. Is that available from a URL or as an application?
No, it's right now it's a file on my computer.
Oh, okay. So it's like a concept.
Right.
Well, can I bid for it to become something that we can access online? It's brilliant.
Certainly. I've sort of got to wrap my head around how, to me, I'm still struggling with, aside from the structure questions, I'm struggling with, okay, what will this tool do for me? And I see it as maybe, helping someone like Judy who's building a profile. It may be able to recommend different versions of the verbiage based on what you've created from scratch. It may be able to go in and say, well, this set or these few should be considered as well. So that might be one option for it. I'm still sort of conceptualizing how it might become a tool for people. Matt, do you have any comments on it?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think, yeah, when I was building the flatteners a couple of years ago, I was doing the same thing, just trying to figure out, okay, what are all the pieces and parts that are in here? And then, yeah, you start to realize, oh, there's so much nesting that goes in there. And that's where I kind of got discouraged on building one from, by hand. I was like, surely there's gotta be some sort of builder. And then I was like, oh yeah, we're building a profile server. I was like, oh, thank goodness, because I mean, I'm okay. I'm fine messing with JSON, but just so many, when you have rules around a schema, then it can be crazy. So, so in terms of, so Judy, if you were going to build a Pebble profile, do you think it might make more sense if you created the working group and then added us as collaborators? So that way, if you did publish it, it would already be in your working group. And I say that just because the question I asked Jason the other day was around, transferring a profile from one working group to another. And it seemed like it wasn't straightforward. Like you could do it through the API, but it was error prone. So like if we built it somewhere else and then you wanted to publish it, you would have to kind of rebuild it. So I wonder if it might make sense for you to start it and then add us as collaborators.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I think that since Pebble Pro is like, it's a product, I can see where it really, would make sense for, for there to be a group that represents my company and, for it to be kind of owned by that group. But I don't want to default to that automatically because, a lot of the work that we've done is collaborative. Pebble Pro is built on open source code. And, we've done so much through the cohort. So I don't, I want to definitely consider the offer to use the existing, user group. And like I said, particularly if that might have the potential for other people to get involved in it, it's something I would consider. I don't want to automatically be like, no, mine, but, at the same time, I understand that, like, there may be a problem with it.
I think she's turning into a droid.
For us to, so I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, a lot of your words went missing there. We were only getting bits of it.
Oh,
your audio went very digitalized.
Sorry about that. So anyway, I'll check and see if there's kind of a strong preference within my company to do this, but I really couldn't say. I think that it behooves us to, kind of involve people within the industry and involve, the interested parties as potential users and collaborators. So yeah, I think it's possible that we could do the user group thing.
I'm sorry to say that Jason isn't here, but if it was me and the direction I appear to be taking for my work is I'm going to look at the common reference profile that he published for the NETC and the Navy and see about using that sort of as a springboard. Like I said, sort of like our Dublin core, in that if all of those verbs are well documented in that document, it makes sense to sort of build the custom piece for any profiles I need to build above and beyond that, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I might recommend you review those documents, even though they have the NETC and Navy stamping on them.
Oh, yeah.
They may be helpful. And one of the things, one of my goals was to validate with him that those documents are actually part of ADL's work. And as I recall, he explained it to me when he first shared them with me, is they are considered open source, but I do want to validate that with him. Meaning that, you know, you would be able to adopt a version of it and make a Pebble version of it if you wanted to have, you know, the Pebble Common Reference Platform.
Right.
And then a profile beyond that would sort of show alignment to the two.
Right. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be government work as well. So likely. I'm gonna get some feedback from Mike Hernandez as well. He works for us now.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, he's technically my boss now. So if he has any input, he normally has a lot of insight into things that have been done, particularly for the Navy, for ADL. So I'll get his input on that as well and stamp. So yeah, as far as doing a kind of, you know, user research sort of focus, I'm kind of turning that over. I'm kind of wondering, I know that we've done that in part already. I'm wondering if, you know, I try to stay very user focused about my work, but part of me is also just getting to, you know, saying, okay, why don't we just document what we have? Because we've done a fair amount of like building the existing verb usage and structure and everything like that out of our user research. But I'm wondering about ideas for, you know, could we expand that? Would it behoove us to still take a, you know, a user research pass at this? And what might be the opportunities for that? Because I don't know, you know, I don't know if people are going to donate their time. You know, I'm really not sure.
Well, I think it depends on, you know, some of how you approach it. Like you say, you're wanting to keep it close to the cohort kind of view. And part of what I wanted to do with this group, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I was more focused on the usage, the consuming these profiles, and you sort of brought in the, you know, the higher level need. So that's part of why I wanted to get Peter and you together. And I'm glad that happened. I hope you to sort of take advantage of the context, because Peter and Julian were working on a profile separately, and they wound up doing exactly what Matt described and passing it from one organization to another and having to rebuild it.
Interesting. Okay.
And so the challenge there is if you do something from a generic organization and it doesn't, you know, gain traction in a sense, it doesn't really get governance that you need, you may have to recreate it. Part of what I wanted to ask you is there a profile out here that is aligned? I thought there was an EPUB.
There is an EPUB profile, and Pebbles greatly expands the capabilities that you might have in a typical EPUB experience. There's quite a lot of interactive JavaScript-based interactions. So there's it may well be that it's sort of based on the EPUB one. We might want to take a look and make sure that we're sort of aligning with it, because there are certain things that, you know, we could, it probably is not going to make sense to position. I think that's probably the closest one that we would see, but there's no question that it would be greatly expanded.
I don't even see it in the current profile server. I do see
Have lately
annotation one, annotator.
Actually,
anyway,
yeah, Brian, thank you for putting us together. Judy, totally apropos of not this at all. I'd like to talk to you anyway. As I mentioned, I run a business that creates e-learning content. So I'm always interested in authoring tools, especially ones that are XAPI smart. We actually also sell authoring tools in Australia. Specifically at the moment, we're selling Domino, but from what I know of Pebble, which I wasn't aware of until this morning, so now I've been looking at your website, it actually looks really interesting. And a lot of the people that we turned away who came to us interested in Domino, we may have been able to offer them an alternative. So we should probably talk.
Let's do. I think you'll find it a lot easier to use.
Yeah, my staff are sort of not all that keen on Domino, but I sort of got into it because I just liked the idea that somebody produced a responsive authoring tool that did have XAPI in it.
No question.
But you've got one too, and you've got one that's probably a bit more robust. Domino's, yeah, well, I'm not gonna.
Domino is closest in terms of feature parity to Pebble. Everybody is going to compare us to Rise, already is. But in truth, Domino is the closest comparison in terms of the features and, of course, the XAPI capability and everything like that. There are areas that we have that they don't. Similarly, there are areas that they have that we don't, but it's the closest for sure. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk offline about that, or well, it'll be online because I'm not gonna fly to Australia.
Well, I don't know. When we're allowed to, you should do.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely.
I've been to your beautiful part of the world many times. I'm married to an American.
Well, anyway, I would if I could, but let's talk separately about that. Sure.
Sounds great.
Cool.
Peter, could I ask one more task of you before we wrap up?
Sure.
Let me just throw sharing and prompt you through this. You made some comments that I think would be valuable to both Matt and Judy. That some of these profiles are best not used, if I can put it.
Yep.
I mean, aside from this little eye opener that there are no published profiles if you show verified only, you also had some comments about things that were pulled in that the ADL or another organization may regret.
Rusticity.
Rusticity may regret that they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Could we go through this list and have you just sort of tick off which ones?
Yeah, look, it really actually it's only one.
Okay.
But unfortunately it's a big one. It's the what they call activity streams. So it's there. Now, history of this. Activity streams is a project that predates XAPI. And in some ways, it's sort of a rival to it, really. And it was set up to provide something a little bit like XAPI for the purposes of describing what they call activity streams. So that is syndicated content. Now, in order to boost the XAPI adoption, in the first instance of the server, both organizations went and grabbed activity streams words and just holus bolus dumped them in and said, here's the activity streams profile. Problems, many, but number one, they are, well, the most obvious problem is that activity streams themselves are not associated with XAPI in any way. In fact, if anything, they're a rival, and they don't sort of look at what they do from an XAPI perspective, meaning that what they develop, you know, you guys are free to use it if you must, but, you know, we're certainly not going to make our stuff tailored to XAPI's needs. Two, activity streams themselves have updated their profile. And when I say updated, a better word is radically overhauled and totally changed it in every conceivable way. And then simply threw all of the original IRIs to the wind and stopped supporting them. So all these words, and look at this, look at the nature of the words they grabbed. They, added, agreed, all these important words are now locked up with activity streams. Now, if you click on one of them and see it's IRI, it will not resolve. Why? Because activity streams no longer support version 1 activity streams at all. So activitystree.ms/accept won't go anywhere. It'll give you an error. And the other problem you'll have is that activity streams, so a lot of these important words, as I say, they don't resolve. But the worst thing about it is that activity streams then handed over the project to the W3C consortium. So it's no longer there's no public sort of group behind it. It's just sort of managed by the W3C consortium. And it was never intended for use in this context. So they regretted it almost immediately. Oh, by the way, there's another irritating thing about them. If you look at the word, the verb is accepted, but look at the IRI. The way activity streams works, the verbs are all present tense, not past tense. For an XAPI use, you want them to be past tense because you're describing an activity. Well, the whole basis of activity streams is that it's real time. And so all the verbs are present tense. So in fact, the IRIs don't even match the verbs. So when they imported them, they thought, oh, we better not use these. We better make them past tense. So they're not even the original word. And other problems as well. They don't come with all of the patterns and recommended use because they weren't recommended for this use. So there's no guidance as to their use. So it's a really bad profile. But the trouble is we're sort of stuck with them because a lot of people have adopted them. So the main reason that we set up our 2 profiles, or 2 original profiles, not geolocation, but the other 2, is to pick the most used words out of what you're looking at here and put synonyms up that were specifically alternatives. So we haven't, redefined the word accepted, but where we see one of these words as getting heavily used, we'll put in a synonymous word that is designed to be used as an alternative, and then we'll say in its description, this is an alternative to. Oh, by the way, a lot of these words, not all, but a lot of them, if you click on them, the descriptions will now say, please don't use this. It's actually on the server, please don't use it.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a mess, activity streams.
That's part of why I wanted to bring it up, just as a word of warning. I keep losing the control of the tab, my apologies. But I think the other side of this is it's also a word of warning about governance. We don't want to build something we can't maintain ourselves. It looks like this set is in a mode that we cannot mark it as outdated or delete it even though we know it's not the best.
Well, a good public service would be to encourage them to go through and mark all the rest of the words in here, please don't use this, and then over time people will stop using it and they'll start using the alternatives.
Right.
And there's stupid things in here. They've imported video as an activity type. Well, there's a video profile.
Yeah.
Really?
I'll tell you a profile that actually needs to go away is the actionable data project, because that was what Pebble used to be. That was its name in the first year of development under ADL. And so, yeah, anyway, we're way off topic, but yeah, right there, that's, yeah, used to be a Pebble, but you can probably see, you know, from just the dates on these 3/5/2021, that was like the day that most of these got updated.
Yeah.
When it launched and I went in here, I was like, what, who published an ADB profile? Like, that's almost creeperish. But clearly it was just imported from the repository. Anyway.
That's what they did.
Well, we're making good points.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Well,
Any other
looking forward
comments?
to working on this. Y'all are bringing a lot of good knowledge, and this is going to be fun.
Good to hear, Judy. Matt, Peter, Judy, thank you all for sticking around.
No, thank you. I can stop recording.